Now, the 2 years he's referring to there is the Conservatives' promise to hold by 2017 a referendum on Britain's EU membership. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more now with Ferdinando Giuliano. He is an economics correspondent at the Financial Times newspaper in London. Ferdinando, it seems to me that we're just in this classic election phase. Official statistics come out and the Conservatives say, hey, look, this proves our point. And then Labour comes along and says, no, look, it proves our point. They are always going to interpret things differently. I'm just wondering how you've interpreted it and where you think the UK economy is.
Well, I think the UK economy is in pretty good shape compared to other G7 economies. Growth last year was the fastest in the G7 club, so that's pretty good. And at the same time, unemployment is coming down sharply. It's below 6% at the moment. Which means, and real wages are finally starting to rise, largely thanks to inflation, which has fallen to zero. Of course, that's the consequence of low oil prices. But there are some signs of weaknesses in the economy. Productivity, in particular, is really, really bad, meaning that the economy just can't produce enough goods and services given the amount of labor which is employed. That's been stagnant throughout the coalition record. And the external deficit is really in the red. It's around 6%, 5.5%, which is the highest since the post-war period.
The figures show, though, and this is what Labour picks up on, that Britain is going through its slowest recovery in 100 years. Do we take a long-term view like that? Is that actually relevant, or is it more about what this coalition has achieved or not achieved in the last 5 years?
Well, sure. I mean, I think Labour certainly has a point in pointing out the fact that this recovery has been very slow by historic standards. It's taken many years for the UK to go back just to the level it was before the crisis. But at the same time, I think it's important to look at what's happened around the world. Every major economy has really had difficulties during this recovery, and at the same time the UK was hit indirectly by the Eurozone crisis. So I think Labour is right in pointing out to the fact that the recovery has been very slow, but at the same time there are some external factors which we shouldn't really forget.
Well, that EU is such an important external factor, so why don't we just stay with that for a moment. You've got the Conservative Party talking about a referendum on EU membership. An in or out referendum if it is returned to power. At the very least, whether the UK stays in the EU or not, at the very least it means uncertainty, and that's not good for business, is it?
Indeed, I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses of the Conservative programme vis-à-vis business, is this referendum uncertainty, which may last for, as we know, for a couple of years. And it's not very clear. I mean, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, assuming he stays in power, is saying he wants a new, better deal from the EU. That means repatriating some powers and getting some assurances over not devolving more powers. And then he will decide where he stands. But then on the right-hand side of his party, he's got people who really just want to take the UK out. Right. The rest of the EU is by far the UK's single largest trading partner, and there are fears that many businesses could move away from London and relocate somewhere on the continent or perhaps in Ireland, where the UK to live.
Let's talk briefly about the two main parties and I guess their main economic planks that they have. The Conservative Party, their line, and I've said it before, it's stay the course. Don't deviate, we're recovering well, you should trust us to finish the job. On the face of it, that sounds like a good argument because the UK is moving forward, by the numbers at least. As you said, it's one of the strongest G7 nations out there. Is that the line the Conservative Party peddles? Is it as strong as they would like us to think it is? Put it that way.
I think it's a perfectly sensible message to try and pitch. I mean, things are not great, they could be better, but if you look around the world, the UK is doing pretty well and things are going back on the right track. The Conservatives are arguing they're getting the country back on the right track, fixing the public finances, getting going again, and unemployment is coming down. I think that's a perfectly sensible message for them to try to pitch. Now, of course, the opposition has a different message, and that says, look, growth may be good, but living standards have been pretty poor. They've stagnated for most of this government, and they're only very slowly recovering now. What the Labour Party, the left-wing Labour Party, is trying to advocate is that really this recovery has been for very few, for the rich, for the wealthy, for the friends of the Conservatives, the way they depict this. And they are making a case for somewhat a more interventionist approach by the government into the economy.
I guess the thing for the Labour Party is that they have this very populist message which will probably resonate with a lot of people who, as you say, have seen the living conditions and the work and the job all go down in the last 5 years. And they'll be saying, yeah, they'll agree, yes, tax the rich. In fact, what is it? It's raising income tax for those who earn over £150,000, tax on homes over £2 million. There's a risk there, though, isn't there, if you alienate business, perhaps?
Indeed, I think that's one of the key problems Labour faces. There was a letter in a British newspaper just a few days ago with 100 business leaders saying that the UK should not vote for Labour. But at the same time, I think they have a strong positive message to send to business over Europe. The Labour Party doesn't want to have a referendum over the EU at the moment. It thinks the situation between the UK and the EU is just too fluid because the Eurozone is integrating, and the Labour Party thinks it's better to see first where the Eurozone heads and then for the UK eventually to decide. So although I think there is a risk in this kind of interventionist rhetoric from Labour, and business is already pushing back and rallying behind the Conservative, I think when it comes to Europe, Labour has a stronger message it can send to business than the Tories.
Ferdinando Giuliano talking UK economics with us on Counting the Cost. Thank you.
Thank you.